Hi guys! Thank you for the time that given to our group. How are you today? I hope you are doing well. Now we are from the second group of 4A Denpasar class who would like to explain you the materials about popular methodology. Okay, before we start, let me introduce our group's member. The first is Komang Yuliastuti, the second is Komang Oktariani Mekarsari, the third is Putu Eka Artajayanti, and the fourth is me, Desak Alycia. On this occasion, what will we talk about? The first is definition of approach, method, procedure, and technique. Second is grammar translation, direct method, and audiolingualism. The third is presentation, practice, and production. And the last is PPP and alternative to PPP. Okay, we will start the first material. It is a definition of approach, method, procedure, and technique. The first one is approach. People use the term approach to refer to theories about the natures of language and language learning, which are the sort of the way things are done in classroom and which provide the reason for doing them. An approach describes how language is used and how its constituent part interloop and offer models of language competence. An approach describes how people acquire their knowledge of the language and make statements about the condition which will promote successful language learning. The second one is method. A method is the practical realization of an approach. The originators of a method have arrived at discussions about type of activities, rules of teachers and learners, the kind of material which will be helpful, and some models of syllabus organization. Methods include various procedure and technique as part of their standard fare. When methods have fixed procedure informed by a clearly articulate approach, they are easy to be described. However, if a method takes procedure and technique from a wide range of sources, for example, some of which are used in other methods or are informed by others' beliefs, it is more difficult to continue describing it as a method. The third is procedure. A procedure is an ordered sequence of technique. For the example, a popular dissertation procedure starts when students are put in small groups. Each group then sends one representative to the front of the class to read the first line of poem which has been placed on a desk there, and each student then goes back to their respective group and dictates the line, and each group then send a second student up to read the second line. And from this procedure is a sequence which be described in a term such as first you do this, then you do that. The last one is technique. A technique is implementational, meaning that a technique is something that actually takes place in language teaching or learning in the classroom. All activities that take place in a language class are techniques. Techniques are not exclusive to certain method, and to some extent, different methods may have similar technique, even though they must have different technique. Language teachers may develop their own technique as long as the technique is still consistent with the assumption or theories of the method from which the technique derives. Technique not only include the presentation of language material, but also the repetition of the material. Therefore, the position of technique is at the implementation phase and it is often called procedure, while approach and method are at the level of design. Okay, the next material will be present by my partner.
Hello everyone, my name is Putu Eka Artajayanti with student number 20111711046. Want to tell the next material about grammar translation method, direct method, and the last one about audiolingualism method. So, without any further ado, let's get to the list. Alright, for the first, I would like to tell you about the definition of grammar translation method. The definition of grammar translation method is a method of teaching foreign languages derived from the classical method of teaching Greek and Latin. In grammar translation classes, students learn grammatical rules and then apply those rules by translating sentences between the target language and the native language. Advanced students may be required to translate whole text word for word. And then, the method has two main goals. For the first, to enable students to read and translate literature written in the target language, and the second one, to further student general intellectual development. Next, about what we should use this method. Because this method focuses on the application of grammar and correct sentence structure. This is especially helpful in teaching students how to write and read in another language, allowing them to explore interchangeable words and phrases more effectively than a verbal teaching method. This method also easy to construct and make class activities or learning games are rarely necessary as students are translating text to another language directly. Next, about the advantage and disadvantage to this method. The advantage to this method number one is the target language is quickly explained in GTM. The reason because translation is the easy way of explaining meaning or words and phrases from one language into another. Number two, teacher and student are easy to communicate or it does not need native language. So the teacher can easily assess whether the student have learned what he has taught them. Number three, the student easy to understand because of grammatical lesson. Because ESL students don't successfully have the ability to translate English. The last one is this method requires few specialized skills on the part of teacher. Grammar rules and translation tests are easy to construct and can be objectively scored. Next, about disadvantage of this method. The disadvantage of this method number one is no scope for effective communication and very tedious for learners. Direct translation is widely regarded as an inefficient way of becoming fluent in any language. Number two, ineffective method. That because it's a teaching method which studies a foreign language in order to read its literature focusing on the analysis of its grammar rules and to translate sentence and the text. Number three, more importance on grammar rules than on meaning exact translation is not possible. Translation is indeed a difficult task and exact translation from one language to another is not always possible. And the last one about slow learning rate and making learners think in L1. That because a person can learn a language only when he internalizes its patterns to the extent that they form his habit. Alright, the last material about grammar translation method is about several roles between teacher and student. Number one, teacher's role is a teacher are just guide because grammar translation deals with the memorization of rules, manipulation of the morphology and syntax of the foreign language. Number two, student role are expected to memorize endless lists of grammar rules and vocabulary and produce almost perfect translation. Next, I will to tell you about the second method is direct method. The direct method in teaching a language is directly establishing an immediate and audiovisual association between experience and expression, word and phrases, idiom and meanings, rule and performance through the teacher's body and mental skills without any help of the learner's mother tongue. This method intends for students to learn how to communicate in the target language. Next, why we should use this method? That because it can be very effective at creating fluent speakers of the target language who can actually use it to get by in day-to-day situation. Teachers may also ask the student question, have them fill in the blanks in an example sentence, or have them read from a work of literature. Alright, for the last material in direct method, I would like to tell you about the advantage and disadvantage of this method. For the first, the advantage of this method, number 1, the focus is on oral practice, therefore the pronunciation improves. Number 2, in teaching vocabulary such as words, idiom, this method is good. Number 3, as there is direct relation between thought and expression, it helps the learners in having good fluency. Using direct method, a teacher helps students having good command over English. Number 4, in this method, the teacher proceeds from particular to general and from construct to abstract. Number 5, it makes the teaching English easier and more pleasant. A teacher uses various image, picture to illustrate his or her point. Number 6, this method creates the suitable environment for learning English language. And the last one, as the unit of speech in direct method is a sentence, students learn to speak complete sentence without any hesitation. So they get confident with command over good English. The second about disadvantage of this method. The disadvantage of this method, number 1, owing to overemphasis on oral practice. The other skill, namely reading and writing, are ignored to a great extent. Number 2, average and below average students, especially from rural background, find difficulty to grasp the things taught via this method. Number 3, this is an expensive method as the teacher is to use some aids for teaching. Number 4, for this method, competent teachers must be there, but there is the dearth of good English teachers in the country. Incompetent teachers can't use this method successfully. Number 5, in the early stage of learning, this method is completely unsuccessful. And the last one, the background at home must also be foreign language friendly for this method. The student whose parents can speak English well get more benefit from this method. Next, the third method that I can tell is audiolingualism method. The audiolingualism method is a method for foreign language teachings with emphasis the teaching of listening and speaking before reading and writing. This method is combination between behavioral psychology and linguistics. In the audiolingual method, the student first hear a language, later they speak the language, and after that they read and write in it. Next, why we should use this method? Because this method very important to advise that students should be taught a language directly without using the student native language to explain new words or grammar in target language. However, unlike the direct method, the audiolingualism method did not focus on teaching vocabulary. Rather, the teacher drilled students in the use of grammar. For the last, I would like to tell you about the advantage and disadvantage of this method. For the first, about the advantage. The advantage of this method, number 1, this method helps the student learn and develop listening and speaking skills quite efficiently. Number 2, visual aids help in the enrichment of vocabulary. Number 3, this method is very easy and convenient to teach large group of students. And the last one, correct pronunciation and structures are learned easily. Next, about the disadvantage of this method. The disadvantage of this method, number 1, this method does not help in developing communication competence. Number 2, the student exposure to the vastness of language remains just quite limited. Number 3, this method does not encourage students to reflect on the meaning of words. Their knowledge remains limited to sound of words. Number 4, reading and writing skill remain neglected. it is a mechanical method relying more on drills and memorization. Number 5, the students are mere passive learners. Well, that's all that I can tell about grammar translation method, direct method, and audiolingualism method. For the next presentation will be explained with my partner, Yuli.
Om Swastiastu. Hello guys, thanks for the time that given to me. My material is about PPP or presentation, practice, and production. But before I start, let me introduce myself. My name is Komang Yuliastuti, you can call me Yuli. I'm from English Language Education Department for a Denpasar class. And yeah, without any further ado, let's get straight to the video. So guys, our material number 1 is about presentation. So what is presentation? A presentation is a means of communication that can be adapted to various speaking situations, such as talking to a group, addressing a meeting, or briefing a team. A presentation can also be used as a broad term that encompasses other speaking engagements, such as making a speech at a wedding or getting a point across in a video conference. And a presentation requires us to get a message across to the listener and will often contain a persuasive element. For example, be a talk about the positive work of your organization, what you could offer an employer, or why should you receive additional funding for a project. So, why should we use this method? In order to give a good presentation, people often study with a presentation expert. Also, there are many famous speakers who are often noticed by those who want to speak well in public. Skill before an audience is essential for anyone who wants to progress. Through information, it is expected that the purpose of the learning process can be accomplished. In learning process, information from a presentation is very important to the class. And then about the advantage of presentation as a method. The advantage number 1 is develop critical thinking ability. Critical thinking can be defined as the ability to look at a matter objectively and rationally, so that results are obtained according to established fact. Through the presentation, students will be trained to think critically and thus be able to identify problems properly. Number 2 is increasing activation of a student in the classroom learning process varies. Teachers have a duty to implement methods that can increase activation of learners so the learning atmosphere is more alive and the activity centers is no longer in teacher. The presentation is rated effectively as a method for improving student activity. As a learning method, presentation requires the cooperation of all students in the class. Therefore, other students should be actively involved with this question. Number 3 is honing our ability to communicate with others by word of mouth. And our use of the method of presentation, in turn, is to hone the student's communication skill. During the presentation, the student must be a speaker who encounters many people in a rather long period of time. Surely, such conditions require the ability to communicate well so that a message is conveyed to listener. Number 4 is training students to be self-reliant. Presentation requires preparation for collecting materials, preparing paper, dividing assessment, and making handouts distributed to other students. It is the responsibility of the student who become the material editor. Using the presentation as a helpful learning method for training students self-reliance. They do not regularly get a material bribe from their teachers, but also have the opportunity to actively search for themselves according to the topic. Number 5 is encourage students to read more and more. Another advantage of presentation is to get students to read more. In collecting the presentation material, of course, students should read the research book. The more books are read, the better the presentation will be given. It is different just listening to a lecture from a teacher. And then about the disadvantage. The disadvantage number 1 is there is the risk of technical constraint. Technical difficulties are associated with a problem that may occur in electronic devices. For example, a laptop or computer that is suddenly short-lived, several internet network, or malfunction of LCD projector. The devices is indispensable for an unstructured presentation. Therefore, checking the backup devices before the presentation is advisable. Number 2 is we need a huge amount of media support. Another lack of the method of presentation in learning is that many media outlets such as laptop, LCD projectors, cable, and wireless pointer. All such devices were not cheap, so the school had to provide expenses to buy them. And number 3 is careful preparation is needed. The duration of the presentation can be long or short, depending on the time of learning appropriation and the number of groups that serve as editor. Still, the necessary preparation must be made. If the method was first applied, it would be difficult for students to prepare the material that will be presented. Not to mention, some students may be poorly equipped to operate. And the next material is about practice. What is practice? Practice is any activities that allow students to put into practice the knowledge and skill acquired through the study material. And these activities include case studies, exercise, quizzes, tests, laboratories, simulation, and so forth. So, why we should use this method? Practice is when a person engages in a deliberate process of repetition with a view to accomplishing a particular goal. Learning something new and practicing something new look alike, but this method have very different results. In some cases, learning activities can prevent one from taking important action in order to achieve a goal. For example, this is how you want to learn a foreign language. You, in turn, read a book on how to learn a foreign language quickly. Doing practice is one way that enables one to apply the knowledge they have gained in the learning process. And then it's about the advantage of using practice method. The advantage number 1 is provides basic skill for students. Practice and drills give students an opportunity to learn certain concepts quickly and effectively. Teaching students through various methods such as flashcards or repetitive rewriting can help them use this skill in different environments and many different ways. For example, some students who learn visually may benefit from rewriting and misspelled words in order to retain the correct spelling. Using various drills for various learning styles can help students integrate various tactics for remembering skill. And number 2 is allow students to build on master skill. Students can now learn higher level skill while accessing master skill quickly and effectively. Drill and practice can help this skill become second nature. And then it's about the disadvantage. The disadvantage number 1 is hard for students to focus when done too often. Students who only learn through drill may get distracted and bored with practice drill, especially if they have already mastered the skill. And number 2 is students may not truly be learning. Students may be relying on just remembering in order to take a test, but are not really understanding the material properly. If the learning becomes too predictable, students may not gain clear knowledge about the skill they are supposed to master. They may just be memorizing the material, and that can cause problem for them when trying to accomplish more complex tasks and learn more advantagelism. And then the last material is about production. Production is a form of learning whereby students create a product or a constrained artifact that is the focus of learning. Production is one of kind of project-based learning, and production itself can be seen as the process, and the product is typically the end of result. And then it's about why we should use this method. So guys, production itself can serve as a motivator by engaging students in the process of their learning. Production also allows students some leeway to work in ways that they prefer and help them to develop real-world skill and also develop their ability to communicate and collaborate with others. And the most important is students are motivated by producing a tangible outcome. And the next material is about the advantage. The benefit of student production for learning include student gains not only in language and content but also in social skill, critical thinking and planning, communication, cultural knowledge, and evaluation. The production process is a carefully designed process and crucial for the success of the project. Planning, development, and evaluation are three general stages in the production process. Production project can also benefit a wide range of students. For example, this project can support the skill and ability of English language learner. Production offers student opportunities to communicate in a variety of models. For example, speaking, drawing, gesturing, to receive language and content input in a variety of models. For example, graphic, video, listening, and to use different learning styles. For example, hands-on, visual, oral, during the production process. And the last one is the disadvantage. The disadvantage number 1 is students may commit fraud against assignment or performance by other or copy the work of other. And number 2 is when assignments are given too much, then students may experience boredom that upset the student inner calm. And number 3 is it is difficult to assign tasks that can fulfill the characteristic of individual differences and the interests of each student. And the last is the conference may tend to take time and considerable expense. Okay guys, that's all for me. Thank you for watching, and the next material will be given by my friend. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the time that given to me. Now I will continue the presentation. Before I start, let me introduce myself first. My name is Oktariani Mekarsari. My student number 20111711035. Okay, the last topic material is about PPP and alternatives to PPP. First one is the PPP. The PPP procedure, which was offered the teacher training as a significant teaching procedure from the middle of the 1960s onwards, took not then referred to as the PPP or PPP, came under a sustained attack in the 1990s. It was critics argue clearly the teacher-centered and at least in the kind of the procedure which we have demonstrated above, and therefore it uneasily in a more humanistic and the linear-centric framework. It also seemed to assume the student learn in the straight lines, that is, starting from knowledge through highly restricted sentence beside utterance and on to the immediate production. Next is alternative PPP to ESA method. Definition of ESA method is engage, study, and effective. ESA is the most effective teaching methodology. Teachers who use ESA can productively organize in their lesson. Through ESA, students are focused and highly motivated to learn. The first concept by the Jeremy Harmer in his book is How to Teach English. ESA is the method of the structuring your lesson in 3 elements. The different stages of ESA can be flexible and used to keep students engaged all the times. ESA stands for Engage, Study, and Effective. By using ESA, it gives the teacher the flexibility to conduct a classroom in an organized and productive way. ESA is extremely important when it comes to the teaching because it keeps the student interested, motivated, and eager to learn more. That is why all the teachers, especially new ones, should learn the ESA method when the teaching student a new language. Okay, the next is the elements of ESA method. The first one is engage. The first phase that the teacher should always start the lesson with the engage phase. In the engage phase, the teacher simply gets the student ready to participate in the lesson. Engaging the student can include showing the picture, realita, contrast, discoveries, discussion with the whole class, miming and acting, promoting to student and answer, and using questions to get the student thinking and speaking in English. The goal of the engage phase is to get the student attention and to elicit and meaning of words or the topic that will be covered in the lesson. This phase is extremely important because it gives the teacher chance to include all the students in the activity. The engage phase also helps the student feel more comfortable and ready to learn. The next is the second one, study. After the teacher has engaged the students, they then move on the study phase. The study phase can consist of many activities such as studying from tests and dialogue, for the example, sentence, crossword, gap fill exercise, and word research, matching games, and drilling. The purpose of the study phase is for the teacher to actually teach the student new word of the topics and show them the correct way of the using them. This phase is also where any error may be corrected and discussed in the tactful way. During this stage, the teacher can helping students come to better understanding of the teach subject so they can learn and move forward in the best way possible. Okay, the last is number third is affecting. The teacher will conclude with the activity stage. The activity phase may include discussions that are for the whole class, small group, or even peers, role play or story building, tasks such as poster or advertisements, simulating, and debate. The activity stage is the student put the work and things they learn in the study phase. By activating the student, it will be help the teacher to know how to have understand by the material that was discussed in the class. It is very important to make sure you always engage the student first and effective the student last. Where we should use ESA method. Using the layout of the ESA method to plan your lesson. They will be more structured, organized, and effective. ESA stands for engage, study, and effective. By using ESA, it gives the teacher the flexibility to conduct the classroom in an organized and productive way. ESA is extremely important when it comes to the teaching because it keeps the student interested, motivated, and eager to learn more. The next is the difference between PPP and ESA method. The stages of ESA are roughly equivalent to the PPP, though ESA is slightly different in that it is designed to allow movement back and forth between the stage. And however, each stage is similar to the PPP stage in the same order. Proponents of the ESA method stress its flexibility compared to the PPP. The ESA method, as defined by the Jeremy Harmer, this primary advocate use more elicitation and stresses more engagement of the student in early stage of the lesson. Both elicitation, drawing language from the student by use of question, prompts, and cueing, and engagement are important in raising student motivation, but both like this can just as easily and should be used in the presentation stage of the PPP. ESA is superior method to the PPP when both are located and from a rugged point of the view. Next is alternative PPP to ESA method. Definition of ESA method is engage, study, and effective. ESA is the most effective teaching methodology. Teachers who use ESA can productively organize in their lesson. Through ESA, students are focused and highly motivated to learn. The first concept by the Jeremy Harmer in his book is How to Teach English. ESA is the method of the structuring your lesson in 3 elements. The different stages of ESA can be flexible and used to keep students engaged all the times. ESA stands for Engage, Study, and Effective. By using ESA, it gives the teacher the flexibility to conduct a classroom in an organized and productive way. ESA is extremely important when it comes to the teaching because it keeps the student interested, motivated, and eager to learn more. That is why all the teachers, especially new ones, should learn the ESA method when teaching students a new language.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our presentation. I would like to thank you for your time and attention. And if anyone has comments, suggestions, and questions, feel free to leave the comment below. Thank you and have a nice day.